Hello, my name is Anders Michelsen. I am an associate professor from the University of Copenhagen and is currently visiting professor at CAPES print project visual practices at the PUC-Rio. I will be giving 5 lectures in the coming period as part of that on the transvisual matters and mattering. I've called it a workshop, which consists of 5 lectures plus group work and plenary sessions. And what I'm going to deal with is what I call the transvisual, a new theory of visual culture. Why do we need a new theory of visual culture? What is it about? Is it really different? And finally, could we find some cases that points in direction of such theoretical effort? In this brief video, I will quickly run you through what we're going to do over the 5 times and give you a little bit deeper insight to why I have over some years now been developing this idea of the transvisual. What's the background and motivation for the transvisual project? In fact, it was set up 10 years ago to explore new ways to understand the visual in a contemporary context by focusing on how the visual functions as a meaningful dimension in a still more complex world. It was a development out of the by now 3 decades old trend towards visual culture studies as part of the increasing family of cultural studies, which has gained space and pace in many parts of the world and universities, in particular in the humanities, but also in parts of social science and anthropology. And that's also my point of departure. So what I want to do is develop a theory and environments of visual culture studies by taking an even more comprehensive look into how the visual is actually playing a radical new role in a complex social world. So how does this differ from visual culture of the sort of broad, well-defined sense that we know about now? A key difference is regards the notion of representation, of discourse, of semiotics and sign theory. The transvisual project doesn't see meaning as predominantly something that is related to representation in those senses. It accepts that there is a huge domain of representation relating to what's often termed language, shared meaning in terms of language. But it also thinks that visual culture should open a new way of defining meaning, which is much more in tune with what we see in a contemporary society, for instance, in social media. In the past half century, we have seen increasing roles of the visual in mediated forms and in direct forms in how we go about our life in the world, how we relate to a lot of different things. And this development can also, I think, be defined as a new role for aesthetics, a radical new role for aesthetics, and the transvisual wants to involve visual culture into this much larger role of social aesthetics. So what we want to look at in visual culture is an approach to the visual as a critical and defining mass of the social world as we know it. So it's not only an issue of representation or some sort of version of a language's meaning. It's also a core problem of how the social is being composed or assembled with Bruno Latour in the current period and increasingly all over the world. For instance, all the places of the world where the internet is accessible, and that is increasingly in very, very large parts of the world. What we have before us, the project wants to argue, is the opening of a domain on social aesthetic of hitherto unseen critical mass residing with the visible as a transformative sensibleness, I call it, mediated or indirect experience when we walk around in the urban environment that many of us live in individual or collective forms. That is, I therefore say, a society that organized by aesthetic practices in new ways in which visual art and culture plays a playing role. In Denmark, there's been opened more than 30 new art museums in the past 3 decades. And that is for good reason. That's exactly because art is increasingly directly involved in many parts of a society where we used to see art as something that we will be doing on Sunday, so to speak, following Kant's famous distinction between different spheres of rationality. Art is increasingly involved in ethical and political issues of the current society, and also in the way we make money, produce, and relate to the natural ground on which we still live. The project develops this increasing and widespread acknowledgement and research of the importance of the visual, of this momentous expansion of the visual, which I've just outlined. And it wants to develop a relevant theory that involves new theoretical approaches into research of visual art and culture and beyond. The project seeks a practice-based theory of the visual which allows a qualification of the dynamic that grows from the issue of representation I just described, what I called an aporia, a paradox that the world is changing by way of the visual, but must be understood by recourse to very determinate models of what a culture is or can be said to be, based basically on language and developed in various different ways throughout the past half century and longer. The Transvisual Project is putting the visual, if you want to put it a little bit quick, into relations of sensibleness instead of relations of representation. The relations of sensibleness are not necessarily relations of representation between, for instance, signifiers and signifieds and classes semiotics. They may be relations of the most diverse identities, from politics to economics and notions of nature and so on and so forth. And they establish, is the argument I want to present to you over the next 5 lectures, an aesthesis of matter, of a new kind of matter, that we can say that we actually discover what I call a mattering, something that I would like to argue is not really understood. So understood aesthetics as a kind of matter is not something we easily go about and something you hear about every day, I want to argue. But we have a mattering in front of us that are contributing to traditional notions such as picture and thing into a diversity. Yet I am going to try and present to you something that's maturely constituted and which is also further a continuous domain. I'm going to go into all this over these 5 lectures by focusing on 5 themes, which is of course a kind of snapshot, if you like, of what is the problem of the transvisual. First, I'm going to go more into what the critical mass is. On Wednesday we'll meet first, and then I'm going to expand on that on Friday by taking up the first case of the 5 lectures, Walter Benjamin's famous ideas on what it means to have the option of technical reproducibility of the image. We're going to go straight into the storm's eye by using the point of departure from his notion of Mickey Mouse, from an edited and non-edited, I should rather say, version of the essay, something that was taken out in other versions of the essay, and there are about 5 or 4 versions of the essays, and not all of them comprehend his very positive approach to Mickey Mouse, the figure of Mickey Mouse, which is a kind of indicator of what I'm talking about as the transvisual. Then on the third day, we're going to go into what is a core proposition on visual mattering, a new visual sensibleness based, among other things, on Maurice Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology of the 40s and 50s. Then on the fourth day, we are going to go back to, or go into, and indicate what can be said to be social aesthetics, this social form of his thesis that redefine, as I try to argue, the way we should look at the current social world. And then we end up with a second case based on the Danish designer Werner Panton, famous designer from the 60s and the 70s, and how he approaches environments, color systems, and patterns as one very specific example of what this course is about, the transvisual and a new visual sensibleness. Okay, so I will see you on Wednesday. Look very much forward to meet you and progress from here. I hope this little video will make it a little bit more clear what we're going to go through, and that you will all meet up with a lot of curiosity and willingness to put all our traditional notions on the head, to confuse ourselves in order to become smarter. Thanks a lot. See you soon.